Good Monday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Hope you had a great weekend. Today was the day as Sue Robinson does issue her findings in the Deshaun Watson suspension. As it stands now, pending an NFL appeal to itself, Watson is suspended for the first 6 games of the regular season. What that means, he can go all the way through training camp, cannot be in the facility weeks 1, 2, or 3, can come back in week 4, and then play after week 6, so in week 7 against the Ravens. So Judge Sue L. Robinson's decision, as we look at a tweet from Tom Pelissaro, Watson exhibited a pattern of behavior that was egregious, but notes that the behavior was non-violent sexual conduct in explaining her decision to suspend him for 6 games. As we look at Josina Anderson, the tweet is, now we wait and see if the NFL will appeal Sue Robinson's decision that Watson should be suspended for 6 games. Per the CBA, 3 days to do that, and they have to do it in writing. Separate sources close to the situation are kind of waiting and seeing before they decide whether to appeal. Anderson goes on to say, Sue Robinson's 6-game suspension falls notably short of the indefinite suspension for at least 1 year that the NFL was seeking. She's told, though, that Deshaun Watson's counsel and reps are displeased with the ruling. Watson's side firmly maintains there should have been no suspension at all. Cleaning up a few things regarding this, let's take a look. Albert Breer tweets out, 15-page conclusion finds 3 violations to the Personal Conduct Code, but it's based on 4 cases brought by the NFL. A 5th case was thrown out by Sue Robinson because the NFL did not interview that particular woman. NFL interviewed a total of 12, and Robinson criticized, Sue Robinson, the judge, criticized the NFL for making calls based on, quote, public perception. Mike Florio, who has his law degree, was a practicing lawyer, has been all over this. He points out the differences relative to the suspension of Calvin Ridley, which is a year for gambling, DeAndre Hopkins, who got 6 games for PED use, and the Deshaun Watson current 6-game suspension.
One thing I'm already starting to see, the comparison.
Yeah.
6 games for Watson, 6 games for his former Houston teammate DeAndre Hopkins, who came out over the weekend and chastised the NFL's PED policy. The union has agreed to it, which puts a guy on suspension for 6 games for any amount of a banned substance in his system, even if he didn't intentionally take it. 6 games for that. A full year for Calvin Ridley, who, while away from the Falcons last year, used his cell phone device to make a legal bet.
For like $200, right? I mean, it was something like that.
Yeah, $1,500, something like that.
Right.
Gone for a full year minimum.
Yeah,
you're going to see some of those things. And look, the bottom line is it's different policies, it's different issues, and PED goes to actual cheating of the game. The gambling policy goes to integrity of the game. The personal conduct policy has nothing to do with the game. The personal conduct policy is an effort by the NFL to reach into the private lives of any player, coach, owner, management, executive, anyone while they're not working and impose discipline for the things they do that the NFL otherwise shouldn't care about. So remember that. Hopkins and Ridley violated policies that are far more central to what the NFL does. The personal conduct policy is very far from the heart of the NFL's business.
Again, that's Mike Florio. It's important to note, though, that the personal conduct policy is Roger Goodell's kind of baby. He really is the one who enforced it, gave it some teeth, and actually has the most in that personal conduct policy. Shannon Sharp on FS1's Undisputed on why he doesn't think the NFL should question Sue Robinson's decision and why he doesn't question it.
I just know this. If a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich and they had 2 cracks to indict a human being and they said no, Sue Robinson has just as much information as anybody out there that's on television that's going to talk about this. She has more information.
She does.
And she had a black role for a large part of her career.
She did.
And she sat on the bench, and she decided the fate of a lot of men, women, and children.
She didn't do these type cases.
Right.
But go ahead.
But
Yes.
she had a role,
Yes.
and she had to render verdicts.
Right.
I mean, she had to determine the punishment
Yes.
of the verdict. The jury rendered the verdict.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't, like I said, I feel more comfortable. Whatever she would have decided, I could live with. What I don't like living with is when the commissioner comes in and he's not qualified.
Yep.
He's letting personal opinion, he's letting the public sway his decision on how much punishment someone should receive. Sue Robinson, had she given Deshaun a year, Skip, I could have lived with that. Yep. She gave him 2 games, I could have lived with that because I don't believe she has a dog in the fight. And she was, and both sides had agreed to whatever she decide, we can live with. Mm-hmm. I just don't like the fact that, Skip, if I get a speeding ticket and then I got to go to the chief of police for him to hear my appeal. Well, the NFL suspends me. I got to go to the commissioner for him to hear. How is that fair?
And again, talking about the appeal process, Roger Goodell holds the hammer. Any type of appeal that the NFL would issue would go to Roger Goodell. See how that goes out. Of course, the union could then take it to federal court, and we'll get into that in the next segment with our legal analyst, Daniel Wallach. Chris Sims, also from Pro Football Talk, talking about all the things that the league has to consider relative to making that appeal on the suspension length.
This is where I just have a hard time thinking Roger Goodell and whoever else are going to make this a little bit more aggressive of a suspension is like you've been saying all along. You know, I just think it's going to become the court of public opinion, and you're going to start to see social media out there and be like, you know, guy takes illegal substance, gets 6 games. You know, guy, mistreats 30 women, still gets 6 games. It's going to be that type of stuff that's going to be thrown in the NFL's face constantly here the next few days, to where they're going to figure out how they want to look in this whole situation, and that's to me the $1 million question of where this goes.
Again, relative to the appeal, has to be filed in writing 3 days, and then if it is filed, it is Roger Goodell who has the ultimate say. Brady Quinn, former Brown, former NFL player, talking about where he believes this Watson suspension is going relative to any potential appeal.
The NFL had floated out there earlier this spring that they were pushing for a year-long suspension. I'm not even sure they really want that. I think they just wanted to leak that out there to let everyone know that they knew that was never going to be in play here. It was going to be at most maybe about half a season, if not a little bit less, and we end up at 6 games. So it's not overly surprising to hear the decision by Sue L. Robinson. I don't expect the NFL is going to appeal this, and I think everyone's going to move forward now and look forward to that opportunity for Deshaun Watson to get back on the field. Let's not mistake ourselves. The NFL is better when they have the faces of these franchises, and that's the quarterbacks as a part of them. And this has been the biggest story in the league now for almost 2 years. And so there's a lot of Cleveland Browns fans clamoring for him to get back. There's a lot of people who are curious to see what he's going to look like when he's back. So that's why I never really felt like you were going to see a long suspension here in play, even though that was reported and touted about for a little bit. I think that was more for optics than anything else.
And again, the league can always hide behind we wanted a full year. An independent judge came back with 6 games. 2 things to remember. The league is going to upset the union if they, in fact, do appeal. The only reason they may do that is if there is a huge public outcry from the fan base, that would then affect sponsorships. So the league is, their thing is they're going to wait and see. They're seeing which way the wind is blowing before they decide whether they appeal or they don't appeal. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we are scheduled to be joined by Daniel Wallach, legal analyst, co-host of Conduct Detrimental. We'll get into some of the decision from Sue Robinson and what it means. We'll also get his thoughts on a possible appeal. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Try C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking about the Deshaun Watson decision. 6 games is the suspension. Let's take a look at this tweet from Tom Pelissero relative to the decision rendered by Sue Watson. So Sue Watson found that Deshaun Watson, Sue Robinson found that Deshaun Watson violated 3 parts of the personal conduct policy: conduct that qualifies as a sexual assault, conduct that possesses a genuine danger to the safety and well-being of another person, conduct that undermines or puts at risk the integrity of the NFL. And then as a subtext to that, in the decision itself, in her decision, Robinson noted that it is undisputed that Watson's conduct does not fall into the category of violent conduct. States the NFL argues that consistency is not possible because there are no similarly situated players to this. And it goes into talk about the discipline for nonviolent sexual conduct. Let's welcome in Daniel Wallach, legal analyst, also the host of co-host of Conduct Detrimental. Daniel, appreciate you joining us. I know you've seen this. What are your thoughts on this decision?
Well, I mean, the NFL's arguments on the merits were all vindicated, as Tom Pelissero pointed out on his tweet thread. For Judge Robinson, the issue ultimately came down to fair notice that this would be the proper level of discipline for a nonviolent offense. And she looked at other instances of discipline meted out by the National Football League, nonviolent offenses, and all of them came in below the 6-game baseline. She also highlighted the fact that he missed all of last season without Roger Goodell declaring him to be on the commissioner's exempt list. And she also pointed to other instances of league owners facing similar allegations of misconduct, not being disciplined at all. So I think the NFL won on the merits of its factual arguments, but the consistency of discipline was paramount for Judge Robinson. And based upon how the league has disciplined others in the past for nonviolent offenses, including other players, other owners, that's why she landed at 6 games. It was all about the absence of fair notice and consistency in the rendering of discipline, not the truth or falsity of the underlying crimes. The underlying alleged offenses ended up all being resolved favorably in the NFL's position, but it came down ultimately to making sure that his discipline was fair and consistent vis-a-vis other cases.
So the NFL did come out with a statement, and as we take a look at, I want to thank Judge Sue Robinson, the independent disciplinary officer, for her review, voluminous review, 3-day hearing. Pursuant to collective bargaining agreement, the NFL or the NFLPA on behalf of Watson may appeal the decision within 3 days. In light of her findings, league is reviewing Judge Robinson's imposition of the 6-game suspension and will make a determination of the next steps. With what she has rendered as her decision, is it going to be more difficult, not difficult at all, for Roger Goodell to increase the games that are suspended?
I think it's going to be more difficult because Judge Robinson focused on her duty as to being fair and consistent in the application of the discipline. She referred to the Deflategate opinion. That she made a determination of law as well as a determination of fact that in all prior occasions involving nonviolent conduct, the suspension previously rendered as to other players was markedly less than 6 games. So she made an effort to provide some appeal-proof protection to her determination because these are factual findings she made. These are findings of law as to what her obligation is as the disciplinary officer. And I think she will have created a potential problem for the National Football League if Roger Goodell increases the discipline in the face of her finding that fairness and consistency of discipline is paramount. That's sort of a legal standard that comes right out of Deflategate. And I think the league would probably make the wise call to let the justice stand where she imposed it, because if they do two things, if they go above 6 games, then it raises the issue of fairness and consistency, and that's a due process issue, a legal concept that is recognized by federal judges. So that could run afoul of that pillar of the U.S. Constitution. But moreover, the closer that the league goes to imposing the full 1-year suspension on Deshaun Watson, which is what the league asked for in the first instance, if Roger Goodell, acting in his capacity as the so-called objective arbitrator, imposes that requested suspension, he will have essentially imposed his own brand of industrial justice, which would potentially run afoul of the Deflategate opinion that the U.S. Court of Appeals issued 6 years ago. So the NFL has to tread very carefully here, because Judge Robinson couched her decision not based upon her unfettered discretion, but upon the consistency and the approach taken by the league in all past cases involving non-violent offenses. And she called the league to account in its failure to properly define the conduct and to put the players on fair notice that non-violent alleged offenses or violations of the conduct policy could subject them to a minimum baseline suspension of 6 games. That baseline suspension only applies where there are violent offenses. That's not the case here. So from the league's vantage point, their vulnerability is the absence of putting the players on fair notice, the prior track record, the consistency with respect to other decisions, and the non-disciplining of league owners. She has created a potential higher hurdle for the NFL to overcome based upon the reasoning in her decision.
And again, it took Judge Robinson maybe a week longer, but she was very methodical, and those things are in there for a purpose, correct?
Yeah, I mean, federal court litigators all over the country would pray and beg to have decisions reached in as quickly as 19 days. By Cleveland Browns fans' vantage point, that might be a little bit too slow, but in the real world of federal court litigation, it's almost unheard of for a judge to issue a ruling following a 3-day bench trial in less than 3 weeks. So she's to be applauded not only for the depth and reasoning of her analysis, but by turning that around so quickly. As far as I'm concerned, as long as this decision was issued before the middle of August, there was going to be plenty of time for Deshaun Watson to pursue any further avenues of appellate and judicial review. And now that she's ruled by August 1st, as long as Deshaun Watson could get into federal court as late as Labor Day, he's going to have enough time. And it doesn't really matter because he's missing the first game of the season under any circumstances. So the element of time, the time being of the essence, has been removed from the equation. And now it comes down to a judgment call as to whether the National Football League wants to risk being viewed by the media and in the court of public opinion as essentially nullifying the viewpoint of a federal judge who's been on the bench for more than 25 years and having Roger Goodell, who doesn't have a law degree, never practiced law, that he knows better when she has couched her reasoning and her conclusion based upon legal foundational concepts such as fair notice, due process, and consistency of discipline. Good luck overcoming that if you're the National Football League, because their attempts to lengthen the suspension are going to be met with, I think, a great amount of scrutiny and skepticism from a federal judiciary, which would view those concepts as so paramount and fundamental to the fairness of the process that now we're not just simply talking about reweighing the evidence and having a federal judge substitute its judgment in place of Roger Goodell. No, this is Roger Goodell exceeding his authority by ignoring these concepts that are elementary and fundamental to the notions of fundamental fairness, due process, and consistency of discipline. Those are the duties of an arbitrator in evaluating labor discipline.
Before I let you go, it sounds like you do not think the NFL will appeal this decision. Is that accurate?
I think they should not appeal this decision. I think they should take their 6 games, because to appeal would run the risk of creating adverse precedent for the NFL and the federal courts, as well as creating the adverse negative perception that the role of the disciplinary officer is just a waste of time and that the league is going to nullify and override her decision no matter how she rules in a case. So that's what the league should do. The league should take a pass, and we'll know by the close of business on Thursday whether the league is appealing or not appealing, because it's an expedited time frame. The league has until Thursday to file its appeal. Watson has until Monday to respond to that appeal. Will they or will they not? I think given the league's past practices and the way Roger Goodell has comported himself, it wouldn't surprise me if the league decided to proceed. But I believe the owners, or a majority of the owners, will prevail upon Commissioner Goodell to not pursue this matter any further. I don't think the owners want it, and the downside risk to the league is too great relative to the limited upside gains that would be achieved by getting a few additional gains.
Daniel Wallach, legal analyst, co-host of Conduct Detrimental. As always, thanks so much for the time. Great stuff. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Live from Dubai. I'm out of the country while I'm doing this. No joke. I landed to the decision. So I came to this a few hours late, but NFL and sports law knows no jurisdictional limitations. I'm ready to weigh in with my insights no matter where in the world I happen to be. So thanks for having me on.
I appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll be checking in with you as we go along as well. Thanks very much, Daniel.
I appreciate it, Dave. Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
You too. Daniel Wallach, legal analyst and the co-host of Conduct Detrimental. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head out to Berea. Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report, talking Browns straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
continues from the Browns training facility in Berea training camp. Browns will put the pads on for the first time in training camp tomorrow. Pleased to be joined by Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Fred, it comes out as 6 games. We don't know what that means when you look at it. Union came out and said they wouldn't appeal. That's not a surprise because they'd be appealing to the other side. The NFL has said they're going to assess. They have 3 days to appeal. What are your expectations with that?
I don't know. I think a lot of it will be with kind of, as the NFL does, public outcry, and what they feel they can get. I mean, one thing you say, hey, we respect that the judge made this decision, spent 5 weeks doing so. We're going to go with it, even though it wasn't what we were hoping. Or they can say, nope, we're going to disregard everything and kind of change it. And it could be, they could move it up to the 8-10 game level. I can't imagine them going back to a season long. The last I was told they were, they would have settled with about a 12 game and a big fine. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they bump it up to 8 games, but I just think that you have a process for 5 weeks. I understand that it was agreed upon to go back, but you're going back to the same people that, the players were trying to get away from. Roger Goodell always making the final decision. And if they do that, that's what you have again.
When you look at the NFL potentially appealing it, that will upset the union. The union came out and said they weren't going to appeal it with the thought that the NFL, or the hope that the NFL would do the same. They did not.
Right. They said they're going to take, but they have the right, according to the CBA, that they agreed to, and that's true. I don't know why the NFL players would have ever agreed to that it goes back to the NFL, but they did, and so we'll see what the NFL does. They've, are worried about their image. They got criticized heavily in the Ray Rice and other things. But then on the other hand, here's you brought in a federal judge to arbitrate this. It's been going on since June 28th, so you're over a month, 5 weeks into it. And then to disregard everything and just say, thanks, but no thanks, we're going to do this. So I don't know. Everybody thinks it's over. It's really not over. I mean, if it stays at 6 games, I think it's an incredible win for the Browns because a lot of people were bracing for most of the season. I think a tipping point is about 8 games. You go more than that, then your season is in doubt for playoffs. But I think they can overcome 6 games for sure.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And the first 4, Pittsburgh's probably the toughest of them, and that's a Steelers roster that appears to be down. So it would appear, if it stays at 6, it's lining up to be a pretty decent season.
Exactly. The first 4 games on paper is arguably the easiest part of the schedule. 2 of those 4 teams were trying to get Deshaun Watson in Carolina and Atlanta. And last year, Carolina won 5 games. The Jets won 4 games. The Falcons won 7. And then you have the Steelers who went to the playoffs, but they lost Ben Roethlisberger. So on paper, those 4 games are all winnable. And then you have the Patriots and the Chargers. I like my chances, coming out of there at least 3-3. If you're 3-3, I think you have a chance, to really be in good shape after the suspension.
Some good news for the offensive line. Jack Conklin activated from the physically unable to perform list. That's a guy, if he's right, he's one of the best right tackles in the NFL.
Yeah, the Browns really missed him last year. He missed 9 games. He ended the season on injury reserve. And you're right, Dave, that was a big blow. And they were scrambling all year to replace him. They had Blake Hance. They had a rookie, James Hudson. Because Chris Hubbard, remember, tore or dislocated his arm, his elbow in the opening game and was on injury reserve all year. And they played catch-up all year because, if you remember, Jedrick Wills had a high ankle sprain, but he kept playing because they really didn't have a backup to the backup. And so Hubbard's been filling in at right tackle, which is good news. But to get Jack Conklin this early back in training camp tells you how well he's doing. And so that could really anchor the line again, having him healthy, because not only did he, he missed the final 8-9 games with with a torn patella tendon. He dislocated his elbow earlier in the season, missed a couple games. So, it's big, and it's under the radar, obviously, with the Watson news. So he should be out there at practice today, which is a big news for the Browns.
And especially those first 6 games, if it is Jacoby Brissett, you want that line at full strength because you want to be able to run the football.
Exactly. You got Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, all those guys that and Ernest Johnson behind a full force offensive line. You really ought to be able to control the game. And that's what Brissett has been as a game manager, not turning the ball over. And there's an argument. Last year, the Browns were 8-9, despite such a bad year for Mayfield. If they just had a quarterback that didn't turn the ball over in key situations, they would have won a couple more games. So Brissett's that guy. In 2019, he had 15 games he started. He had 18 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. So he's not a guy you rely on to carry the team, but you have a good defense and you have a good running game, and he can manage it. That can set you up, especially if it's the first half of the season.
And to kind of illustrate what you're saying, you're not comparing him to Baker Mayfield at his best. Compare him to what you got out of Baker Mayfield last year, which wasn't really good.
17 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, and there was 5 games on the last drive that the Browns could have won if they would have got a first down on offense or scored, and they didn't do that in those 5 games. If you only won 2 of them, you're 10-7. You're right there. So, that's what it comes down to, and I just think that this sets up well as it is now. Right now, it's good news. Hopefully the NFL doesn't throw everything out of whack, and Thursday we're talking about a different situation.
The other thing that has happened, banged up young receivers. So the receiving core is young. Browns want to get a feel for it. Bell, you hope that takes care of itself. He gets back on the field. Anthony Schwartz, sprained knee. And now, Isaiah Weston, undrafted free agent that kind of looked like he had some skills and had some potentials. Now he goes down. Do you think that the Browns are starting to look more and more towards the veterans, or is it not that time just yet?
Well, I think they're always looking. The David Bell situation, you really don't know. They said that they didn't expect it to be long-term, as well as Anthony Schwartz. So they did sign Derek Dillon today, a wide receiver who went to LSU, and they let Weston go, and I wouldn't be surprised to bring that guy back. I think there was a lot of optimism about a 6'4" kid who was long and lanky and had some speed. Unfortunately, he was injured. That's the way the NFL goes now. You get waived if you get injured, and they could bring him back maybe and put him on injury reserve or something later. But I do think I have heard they've talked to some or worked out some in the offseason, guys like Ken Stills. Who knows if they're at that point yet. They're really hoping that Bell and Schwartz can step up and play. So if I don't see them out there really quickly, then you would start to think that they're concerned. But right now, I think they're going to probably stand pat a little bit and see what this young guy had that they just signed today, Dillon.
Yeah, and to kind of illustrate your point, they're not even in pads yet, so they're still kind of ramping up. If you get into next week after, is that when you think it becomes more problematic? Because both Schwartz and Bell, young guys, you can't miss time early in camp.
Yeah, we saw it with Schwartz last year. He got behind and never really caught up, and you hate to see that with Bell or him again. They need these reps. But as you said, of all the guys that were on PUP, to be honest, I thought the last one to come off would be Jack Conklin, and he comes off first. So I would expect, if something doesn't break with Bell or Schwartz this week as far as getting back on the field, then maybe you start looking to bring in a veteran. I don't think they're in panic mode yet, but I do think that the numbers with the pads and that, guys always come up with, hamstrings or pulls, and so if their numbers get any thinner, they're going to have to make some moves at that position for sure.
Before I let you go, how different does this offense look if Jacoby Brissett is the quarterback for the first 6 games? Is it more run heavy, or is that not something that they're going to change?
I think it would be run heavy. I do think he has some of the skill sets, and that's one of the reasons they overhauled the quarterback room to get guys closer to Watson. in the mobile. And I think that he has shown he can run, on occasion. He's athletic. And I think that they would roll him out. They'd use some pistol with him. But I do think that they'll lean heavily on the tight ends. You got Njoku and Harrison Bryant, as well as Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, and D'Ernest Johnson. So those are the best friends of the quarterback. If you play a good running game, don't turn the ball over, and higher percentage passes, I do think that Brissett can do that, especially it's very manageable, 8 games or less. And if it's 6, that's even a luxury, I think.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report, as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
See you, David.
Okay, again, Fred Greetham, make sure you read him, Orange and Brown Report. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. More of Sports for CLE. We're still talking Browns and Browns training camp. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. D and Jimmy Haslam have issued a statement regarding the Deshaun Watson suspension, and here it is. Throughout the process, Deshaun and his representatives have abided by the newly created and agreed upon process for the NFLPA and the NFL to defer to the objective Sue L. Robinson to comprehensively review all the information to make a fair decision. We respect Judge Robinson's decision, and at the same time emphasize and understand that there have been many individuals triggered throughout this process. We know Deshaun is remorseful that the situation has caused so much heartache to many, and will continue to work needed to show that he is on and off field, and we will continue to support him. Again, that is a statement from D and Jimmy Haslam relative to the Deshaun Watson suspension. We are going to bring in Tim Bielik, and Tim, you saw the statement issued by the Haslams, pretty standard. You know that they've said that the time when they signed them, they said they were going to respect the process, and they're kind of reiterating that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what you kind of have to do at this point. Especially considering we're 4+ months out from the trade. There's been a whole bunch of negative PR backlash as a result of the trade, understandably so. But I think this ruling by Judge Robinson kind of represents we're almost, I think, to the end of the saga. I know there's still the chance the NFL could appeal within the next couple days, and if they don't, obviously it'll be a closed matter. Deshaun Watson will miss the first 6 games. It's obviously been very difficult on everybody involved. It's been wrought with controversy, no question about it. And I think obviously, it seems like, thankfully, I think for everybody involved, the NFL and all parties involved, that we're starting to get towards the end of this, and hopefully for the Browns, Watson can continue to kind of make sure he does not put himself in positions to be in those situations again, because obviously based on Judge Robinson's report and all the things that in that long report she put out there is a pattern of behavior that Watson engaged in that led her to making this decision.
All right, we're going to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. We have 2 of them, both of them relative to the suspension. So let's take a listen to the first one about the Deshaun Watson suspension.
Dave, this is Cassius, the self-proclaimed quintessential Cleveland Browns fan. I just wanted to call in, go back, listen to my tape. I told you that Deshaun Watson was going to get 6 games. So essentially what Judge Sue L. Robinson did was she kept it what the league already had established with this 6-game suspension. I believe that that's great news for the Browns. The NFL may appeal it, but I think in the end it's going to end up being 6 games only, because if the NFL appeals it, then the players' union is going to file something in court, and then it's going to turn into a whole different thing. So I think they're going to stick with the 6 games, and the Cleveland Browns will be fine. Now it's time focused strictly on football. Go Browns. They saved our season.
All right, so Tim, we'll get to the other one in a minute. But again, locally, the reaction is most feel it's kind of fair to what they expected.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of feel like that's where it's been trending since the hearings wrapped up. You know, we heard a lot of the stuff that, you know, the NFL is no longer going for the indefinite suspension, the year-long suspension. And this kind of felt like the middle ground between, you know, 10 to 12 games for what the league wanted. And obviously the players seemed like they didn't want any games. So the middle ground there is obviously 6 games. I think that's just kind of what we all kind of expected. And it was kind of interesting to see, you know, in the findings from Judge Robinson that, you know, obviously she found the violations that Watson committed in the personal conduct policy, but of course stating, going within the policy itself, within the history of the NFL and all those different things that have happened, all those combined obviously to put it in 6 games. So fair, I guess, you know, considering where things have ended up as far as, you know, how heavy suspensions have been, how heavy, you know, the punishments have been versus, you know, Deshaun Watson's case where, you know, right now he's only got 1 civil suit pending. He settled all but 1 of those suits prior to, as of this morning. So, I mean, for the Browns, it's not a bad, it's a pretty solid situation for them because, you know, it's a third of the season. It's a pretty decent chunk of it. But you still get Deshaun Watson back for those last 2 games, Baltimore and Cincinnati before the bye week. And then you get him for those last 8 games, and you still got plenty of tough matchups to make or break your season. 6-game suspension, just from a pure on-field perspective, gives the Browns still a really good shot to get into the playoffs.
All right, here is another voicemail, also about the 6-game suspension.
Good morning, Dave. This is Cassius, the quintessential Cleveland Browns fan. What I want to say is I was listening to Louis Riddick on Get Up this morning, and he, like so many other people, are talking about how Deshaun only got a 6-game suspension, even though he was accused of misconduct with 25 women, and how other players have got suspended for an equal amount of time or 4 games for PED, performance-enhancing drugs, and how they felt his suspension, that being Deshaun Watson, should have been more. What they don't understand is when the player is suspended for PED use, well, he's been found guilty of that. He has been proven that he used those drugs. Deshaun Watson wasn't found guilty of anything. They got to understand that he maintains his innocence. Now, he was suspended for making the league look bad and maybe bad choices, but no criminal act and nothing went against it. So 6 games, I think is fair, is what I said all along. What do you think, Dan?
And as always, we appreciate that. Tim, we dealt with this a little bit earlier, and Mike Florio kind of pointed out, you know, the Ridley 1-year suspension for gambling, that has to do with the integrity of the league. The PEDs has to do with kind of giving yourself an advantage. This is off of the field, doesn't minimize what it is, but it's a different set of rules and a different feel for the league. Now, again, the league is concerned about its reputation and the way it looks, because it's an entertainment business that relies on people to buy tickets and want to see the product. That's the reason that the league is going to suspend, Deshaun Watson for that.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you look at Judge Robinson's findings, we know that obviously Deshaun Watson was not indicted by 2 separate grand juries in the state of Texas. Just because you're not indicted on criminal charges doesn't mean you're clear on the personal conduct policy. And obviously from Judge Robinson's report, she found 3 violations of the policy, which is different from the court of law. I mean, it's similar, I guess, to pretty much any clause you sign with an employer. I mean, if you do things that make your employer look bad, I mean, there's consequences for that. That's the reality of it. But, I think along with a lot of other people, we've seen the same tweets like, why does Calvin Ridley get a season, whereas Deshaun Watson gets only 6 games? And it's like you said, there are different parts of the collective bargaining agreement. And because of those different parts, you're going to get different types of suspensions. Watson's suspension involves, obviously, conduct detrimental to the image of the league, no question about it. Calvin Ridley, I mean, we're talking gambling, so that's a very different offense. And that's why you got the year. Obviously, you mentioned PED suspension. That directly impacts a player's performance. So, I mean, you're talking completely different animals. The CBA is just a massive collection of rules and regulations to follow. It's just a question of where your incident kind of lands. And with Watson, personal conduct policy is just really where it happened to fall.
All right, let's take a look. Browns were actually on the practice field for a little bit today. And as we see Deshaun Watson out there, crowd there as well. Fans allowed to see practice today. Watson got in some work without question. Top part of the screen, he finds Amari Cooper, a little slant route. I love this, setting up a tight end screen to David Njoku. Like seeing the big guy out and running. Take a look at Greedy Williams. That's how they teach you to play cornerback. Finds the ball and knocks it down. Some camp practice video out in Berea today, and the thing that I like the most, I like seeing the screen to the tight end, David Njoku. That has the ability to be a big time play there.
Yeah, I remember the Browns really breaking down that playoff game in Kansas City. I think it was like one of the first plays, if not the first play they ran in that game. It was a screen in Njoku. It was a pretty good game. We've never really seen that much, and I'm kind of surprised because you look at David Njoku and the type of athlete he is, you would think he would excel in that role because, again, he has the ideal athleticism you look for in your prototypical number 1 tight end. He's big, fast, he can jump. He has all those athletic tools. Maybe we'll see how much more it's utilized this year now that he is in that number 1 role as opposed to being, number 2 to a guy like Austin Hooper. So I'm fascinated how Kevin Stefanski's going to deploy him, especially now that you have a quarterback in Deshaun Watson who is willing to take those chances deep down the field and is effective at doing so.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we turn our attention to the Browns' schedule, those first 6 games that as of now, Deshaun Watson will miss. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Sports4CLE continues. Pending an NFL appeal, it is a 6-game suspension for Deshaun Watson. We learned that earlier today. Let's take a look at this tweet from the NFL on CBS. These are the first 6 games. So you're at Carolina, home against the Steelers, Jets, at the Falcons, then home against Chargers and Patriots. Tim, when you look at those, the Steelers are always going to be tough. But everybody else, you get the Chargers have to go all the way across country. Now, again, Justin Herbert's really good. And the Patriots, they played well last year. Second year for Mac Jones to be able to keep it up. So those first 6 are not horrendous for the Browns.
No, and I mean, the other thing you mentioned about the Chargers game, not only are they flying across the country to that game, but it's also a 1 o'clock Eastern game, which is a massive advantage for the Browns. I think we saw that a year ago in Baltimore when the Chargers went across the country to play in Baltimore against the Ravens and they got blown out in that game. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen this time around, but certainly it's an advantage for the Browns. And I think it kind of goes to show the advantages they have in the schedule, that it's lighter And even with Jacoby Brissett starting those 6 games, pretty much all of them, I think, are winnable to a large extent, especially considering the talent the Browns have around the quarterback and on the defense. I mean, I said before 3-3, certainly a very likely possibility. I'm still picking that as far as how I think that those first 6 games will go without Deshaun Watson, and they could still certainly make the playoffs at 3-3. I think if I remember right, I was watching ESPN's Get Up this morning. They were talking about 2 3-3 teams that started the season 3-3 a year ago. 2 of them made the conference championship game, so it's certainly possible that they can do that. Even better scenarios, obviously, if they take one of those last 2 games, either the Chargers or the Patriots, they do what I think they'll probably do is go 3-1 in the top 4, and then all of a sudden you're 4-2 with Deshaun Watson coming back in Baltimore, where he's going to kind of have to knock some rust off before they take on the Ravens, and then they got the Monday nighter against the Bengals before the bye week. And all of a sudden, if they split that, you're 5-3. You're in a really good position to make a playoff push, maybe even a divisional push. So that's why I think the 6-game suspension really maybe it takes you out of the division race just a little bit, but the playoffs certainly should still be an expectation, I think.
All right, we've got a couple more voicemails, so let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about what the Browns could go in those first 6 games.
Dave, the results of Deshaun Watson with a 6-game suspension is exactly where I thought it would be. As I called in weeks ago, I do not believe the NFL will appeal because it does not want dirty laundry coming out. So let's say the process worked out and the results will stand. Dave, now on to football. 6-game suspension puts Stefanski on the hot seat again. Because with the quality of roster we have, I believe we should go 5-1. There's always a game where the 50-50 ball might not go your way. Anything less than that, I believe, is not acceptable.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Before we talk about that, let's go back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one also about those first 6 games.
Hey, just calling in fresh off the news off of the Deshaun Watson 6-game suspension. Just wanted to know you guys' take on what you thought the Browns' record could be once Deshaun is able to take the field. So in those first 6 games, I believe they play the Steelers week 3, and they also play the Patriots and Chargers, which I think are the 3 games out of the 6 that are the most up in the air, the least likely for the Browns to win. So I was wondering your guys' thoughts on what the Browns' record could be. I think they should shoot for 500. That would be, I think, still like getting them in the race after the 6-game suspension. They'll be able to still contend for the AFC North with Deshaun coming back. They only play the Steelers once. That's only 1 divisional game, so I think they have the rest of the year in front of them. Just wanted to know you guys' take. Thanks for your time. Have a good day.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Tim, I think you said 3-3. I kind of get the feeling they can. I think they're likely to go 4-2 in that. I don't think they go 5-1. Inevitably, you're going to lose a game early in the year that you kind of feel like you probably should win. But I do think they get either that Chargers or Patriots game. I think they find a way to win one of those at home. If they were on the road, I'd feel a little bit differently. But I think that defense, can be really good.
Yeah, I mean, that's the storyline right now. If we weren't talking about Deshaun Watson, we'd be talking about, how this defense is coming into it, should be coming to its own. These guys have played a full year together. Got a guy like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and obviously Greg Newsome. They're going into their second seasons. Grant Delpit coming into his 3rd season. His second of playing, of course. I mean, obviously missed his rookie season with the Achilles rupture. But, yeah, you look at those 6 games, I kind of agree with the second caller that, 500 seems more realistic. I think that's kind of got to be the baseline where that's where you got to be if you really want to shot the playoffs. If they go 4-2 or somehow even 5-1, I think that would be tremendous for the Browns on their playoff chances. And really, then I think you could kind of start to think of, maybe they win the division. They could push Cincinnati and Baltimore for that AFC North title. Because, again, they'll see those teams again later in the season. But, again, the thing I want to caution people with is don't forget as well, I mean, when Deshaun Watson comes back, remember, he hasn't played. He'll have missed 23 games. I know he's going to be healthy. He's going to be as healthy as he's probably been in a long, long time because he hadn't taken a hit. But there's still rust to knock off. You're knocking off mental rust, and he's going to have to do it in Baltimore. So that's going to be an extremely difficult game. I mean, if, say, it was a 4-game suspension and that was his 3rd game back, I think I would feel more comfortable about that game if I were the Browns because Watson will have had some of those extra reps at full speed. But so that's why I think, 4-2, you really put yourself in a good position to win the division. But I think 3-3 has got to be the bare minimum if you really want to make that playoff push when Watson comes back.
Yeah, and keep in mind, he hadn't played a game in this offensive system either. So all things to consider. Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns here on Sports for CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one relative to the Deshaun Watson suspension.
Hey, Thad from Youngstown. After the decision was handed down today for the 6-game suspension, I predicted 4 to 6. But deep down, I didn't want any. I thought he shouldn't have been suspended. But the NFL has to do what they have to do. But in Goodell, he still can make his decision, which I think he shouldn't. But that's another story. But my problem with this is the pundits on all the talk shows like ESPN, NFL Network. They keep on putting Deshaun Watson down. Well, he had 30 accusers and all of this stuff. You know what? Let this man have a break, please. He's paid these women. He's gone through all the ridicule. It's time for everyone to move on. Hopefully, Goodell will see that, too. This guy is trying to do everything he can to move on. Even the fans of Cleveland have embraced him. Just your thoughts on this. I appreciate you taking my call. Love the show.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Tim, when I hear the national people talk, I get it. They're not as kind of dialed in with it. Like a lot of them that don't realize that the NFL interviewed 12. It went from 5 to 4. They keep throwing around the numbers, and 30 and 24 and 66 in the New York Times. Those are staggering numbers. And if you haven't been following it as closely as Cleveland fans have, it looks a lot worse than it does when you realize what was put before Sue Robinson.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing we have to remember with Judge Robinson, obviously she's a former federal judge. She's never had to deal with any matters like this before relating to the NFL personal conduct policy. So she's just going to go off the evidence that's presented to her. And as we know from, all the reporting that's happened in the last month, that the NFL didn't exactly present the most evidence that it could have. Again, they only picked about 5 cases to present. It ended up being 4 that were counted. The NFL apparently only talked to 12 of the women that were accusing Deshaun Watson of sexual misconduct. Now, again, in Judge Robinson's opinion, obviously finding multiple violations of the personal conduct policy, she found that obviously Watson was guilty of certain things that were done, that he wasn't completely off the hook for the things he had been accused of. So that's why he gets the suspension. But I think, you have to understand there are mitigating factors as to why it's only 6 games. Again, the limited evidence that's presented, past precedents, I think, plays a role in it. I mean, Daniel Wallach, you had before, obviously, had some great stuff out there about why it was limited to 6 games. So I think that's kind of the thing that kind of gets lost when you really only have like a 30,000-foot view of the whole situation, when you're not engrossed in it like we are here when we focus heavily on the Browns and this whole Deshaun Watson situation.
Yeah, and again, the national media is the national media. You can't really get caught up in what they think anyway. All right, let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason one more time. This one about some of the free agents that are out there.
Afternoon, guys. I'd like to weigh in on the potential acquisitions of Sheldon Richardson, Jerry Tillery, and Will Fuller, if you don't mind. There are 3,000 positions in the NFL, and they don't occupy any of them. There must be a reason for that. Even teams with worse rosters than the Browns have passed on him. Richardson is declining at this point. Tillery played for a run defense that was far worse than the Browns had last year. And Will Fuller will probably be languishing on IR by the time Watson gets back from suspension, even if it's just a couple games by that time. Just wondered about your thoughts. I think the best options might be picking somebody up if a hole develops in the roster after cut-down day. Thank you for listening.
And as always, appreciate it. And Tim, that's a very valid point. The guys are older. They might be looking for specific roles on specific teams, Fuller and Richardson. But come cutdown day, when you got to get from 70 whatever to 53, there's going to be some pretty good football players that are available, and that is probably what Andrew Berry's waiting on.
No question about it. I mean, we've seen that, not just with him, but a lot of GMs. They're always scouting across the league, trying to see what's out there. If there's a guy that kind of gets cut loose off a team that's really deep, that can play for someone, and they think they're a fit for depth purposes, they'll want to pick him up and see if they can get something, out of him. But going back to the caller's point about specifically Sheldon Richardson, Jerry Tillery, and Will Fuller, obviously there's reasons why those guys haven't signed. I mean, Fuller's got the injury history. Sheldon Richardson is not getting any younger. His production may be declining a bit. Jerry Tillery obviously didn't have. He was part of a run defense that wasn't that good. So if you're a free agent out there, there's obviously reasons for it. And I mean, maybe some of these guys just don't want to go through training camp. I mean, you never know kind of why a guy decides he doesn't want to sign right away, or if it's even this decision or whatever the case may be. I mean, certainly it wouldn't shock me if one of these three guys sign somewhere, in the next month or so, just because of the nature of pro football. You're always trying to see what's out there. You're always churning the roster to an extent to see if you can find some hidden gems and maybe see if you can get a little last little bit out of a veteran player. And I think that's kind of something to watch for in these, as we get past that final cutdown day.
Tim Bielik, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
You got it. Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, Tim Bielik, make sure you read him, Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow on Sports for CLE.